So good evening, everyone. I know many of you, but just in case, I am Rabbi Eliana Fischel, and I hate that we have to have this conversation tonight, but we do. And so a little background about me, and then I want to hear from all of you, and then we'll get to our programming, and I'll tell you what we're going to do today. So again, many of you know me. I believed when I became a rabbi that there were sort of two different types of rabbis in the world. There were camp rabbis and there were Holocaust rabbis. And I was definitely a camp rabbi, right? I believe that Judaism should be joyous, that it should bring meaning, that it should be uplifting, that it should enhance our lives. And I really don't love being bogged down by our history, even though I know it's important. I think that's no longer the case. There's no longer two different rabbis. There's no longer two different Judaisms. That the anti-Semitism has grown to such an extent, and believe me, I fought against it for so long to say it's not here. I grew up in a suburb of New York where that was 75% Jewish, and really believed that anti-Semitism existed in Nazi Germany in the 1930s, and like maybe there were two bad people in Mississippi, but like that's it. That's where I thought anti-Semitism lived. And it has taken a while, and honestly has taken a number of students' stories, college students, conversion students, and even recently elementary school students and middle school students to share their stories with me and with the other clergy about things that people have said to them, things that have hurt them, that have made me say we can't just say it's going to pass anymore. That's not a luxury we have anymore. And certainly over the last month, we've seen that it is absolutely not a luxury that we can have anymore. That when celebrities are going to use their platform for hate, and then when that platform is going to be taken seriously, then we too need to take that person seriously. And whether we want to write him off as mentally unstable, which perhaps he is, he's also a genius. He's a musical genius. I have many of his albums. We're talking about Kanye West, in case you didn't get it. Like he has that many followers for a reason, and now it's being used against us. And so we have to take him seriously and what's happening seriously, because it's affecting our lives and it's affecting our behavior. Congregants have shared with me that they might not feel comfortable putting a mezuzah outside their home anymore, or their adult children don't. That's really affecting our day-to-day behavior. Not to mention, someone mentioned today that they're thinking twice about coming to synagogue, which God forbid, right? God forbid that in these times when we're not feeling safe, we should go to synagogue more, right? Like we should be with our community more. And it's affecting our behavior to do that differently. So the world is shifting, and somehow it's not. I did actually, what I'm about to present to you, what the program we're going to have tonight, I did about 5 hours ago to congressional Jewish staffers, one of which said, I don't understand why we're still dealing with this when it's the anti-Semitism of the 1900s that my grandmother dealt with. And I feel that way too. I feel that in some ways, this is a new world. It is for me. And in other ways, this is just the same old that we've been dealing with for thousands of years, not just since 1900s. So I want to hear a little bit from you all, or from whoever would like to. Then we are actually gonna use some of the messaging or one of the tweets that Kanye West presented. And we're going to dive into it and dissect it for the anti-Semitic tropes that exist there. Because again, I think sometimes we sort of write something off as anti-Semitism, or say, oh, it's anti-Semitic, it's just full of hate. But if we don't actually dive into it, we can never combat it, right? So I want to give us a few tools, some education for what we're actually seeing that's out there. This might be a review for many of you who sort of have lived in the anti-Semitism space for a long time. I think that's okay, right? Sometimes it's okay to sort of say like, right, that trope of disloyalty, that trope of power, and so that you can refresh it and know, right, that's how, those are the things I say to people when they say it's not a big deal. No, it is a big deal. This is the trope this person is following from thousands of years of hate that is now being used in a new way. And particularly when these words from Kanye West were then amplified over a highway in Los Angeles saying Kanye is right about the Jews, it makes sense that we then need to dissect what what do people think he's right about, right? What is it that he's actually saying about Jews, and what are people saying about Jews? And how do we combat that through education and through pride? So that's the plan for the evening. But I want to start with all of you. And so if you could share either in the chat or out loud, one word that sort of summarizes your reaction, how you're feeling to this. It's not even a new wave, because I feel like it used to be waves because we would get the dull, but now it's just like a tick, I guess, right? Because we never really go down. But how, one word just to sum up how you are feeling in response to what's been going on recently. Concern, nervous, fear. You can also just use your voice too. I'd love to hear your voices.
Annoyed.
Really mad.
Mad, Faith. You said mad?
I'm very mad.
Very mad.
Because
Frank?
I've been saying this since Trump came in, and listening to many friends of mine who are Jewish saying, oh, he can't be an anti-Semite. He has a Jewish daughter.
Sure.
And I'm saying that has nothing to do with it. What he says he is. And to try to get them to listen. I'm sorry, I don't mean to be this angry, but
no, listen, I think that part of this, Dave, I hear you. And I think part of this is actually that we've been taught for so long to not get angry, right? To just sort of have our peace and to be okay and to let things slide. And that's, we can't. Some of the other words that we're getting here: fear, angry, alarmed, sad. Frank, I think you got cut off. Annoyed.
Being used politically damaging.
Being used politically damaging. Yeah. How annoying is it to feel like a pawn in this? Other words that haven't been said yet. Yeah, Lisa?
Frightened and angry.
Angry.
I mean, I think about my granddaughter going to a Jewish school, nursery school every day. And what might happen. I mean, the world is turning scary, and anti-Semitism is really on the rise. So it's scary and it's frightening.
Lisa, thank you. I was literally about to ask you, can you explain your fear? And thank you for explaining it, that there is, in particular, as it continues to rise, and as, right, for my generation, that this is sort of the past few years have been the first time we're really feeling it tangibly. All of us, I think, go immediately to the next generation, at least, I certainly do, about, so what does that even mean for them at school? And if elementary school kids are telling me now about things that are said at the bus stop or things that are said in class, then what does that even mean for a few years down the road, right? It feels like we're headed into the wrong trajectory. Rachel, first time.
So I actually had a situation a couple weeks during the Jewish holidays where they had actually scheduled a field trip on the first day of Rosh Hashanah in my daughter's school. Now, the announcement came from the person that's in charge of diversity and inclusion. And I was like, I'm on the board. I literally was like, this is not okay. She's like, oh, at my calendar. I'm like, my Lily Pulitzer crappy calendar has every holiday on there. How could that be overlooked? And I feel like as a parent, like we're taught about, we have diversity and inclusion is so important, but we're part of that too. And I feel like that's not being taken into consideration. Like, that's just, so, as a parent of kids, the school age children, it's like they talk about diversity and inclusion, but it's not this big tent that I perceive it to be. So
yeah, absolutely, right. That there seems to be an assumption in society. And actually, I was going to say this, that I'm going to come back to in a second, Rachel, that my day today has sort of been filled with anti-Semitism, which is strange for a rabbi who literally hasn't taught about this before, like this week. Like it just hasn't been in my purview to do it. And I was interviewed by NPR this morning, and also went to the Montgomery County Council with Rabbi Shankman and Rabbi Miller and Cantor Hamstra today, because they were voting in the definition of a definition of anti-Semitism as part of a resolution. And it was contentious, Rachel. It was really contentious at the Montgomery County Council to bring in this definition of anti-Semitism, and from people on lots of different sides, and mainly Jews fighting Jews about what it even means to be anti-Semitic, what the definition is of anti-Semitism. And so I think part of this is certainly the outside society looking at us and saying, you sort of look like the white majority, which for the most part, we do look that way. Although we know that our Jewish community is quite diverse, and also that perhaps some of us who might look white do not, because don't identify that way because of our Judaism. And that there's something from the inside out too, that I think we need to start taking ownership of our particularism and ownership of who we are, and saying that we are a hated minority and therefore need to stand up for ourselves as well, and need to ask people to stand up for us as well. Yeah, Stephen.
I suppose I'm as deeply as disturbed as could be, but I'm also not surprised. And it's the lack of surprise that I think for me is one of the important notes. I've seen this before. I'll be Offerman's right now. I'm old enough now to remember having grown up in a mixed community of Jews and Catholics back in the day, of what was said until recently. It was possible to identify the Jews as the problem in Catholic liturgy. Now that's stopped, of course, but I'm not surprised the stuff is still there. So as I try to work my way through this, I think about, I can't be surprised. Oh my goodness, I've lost my virginity on this. What do I do trying to move forward? I guess that's the question for me.
Yeah, and I think that's what we're going to look at. And actually the lack of surprise feels the most sad to me. And I feel it too, even though I'm saying that I'm sort of new at it, right? The lack of surprise of just saying, like, here we are again, right? That was actually in the blurb for this program, right? Here we go again. That makes me the most concerned, because it means that we have the possibility, the danger of letting things slide, right? Of just saying like, oh, people hating Jews again. Fine, move on, right? We can handle it because we're strong and we've persisted, but it doesn't mean we need to suffer through it. Steve Diamond, I'm going to call on you, and then we're actually going to get to looking at some texts and things today.
I think that what is bothering me more is that it's becoming mainstreamed, because you've had the extreme on the right and the extreme on the left who have been trafficking in anti-Semitic tropes for years. But because of the overall, lack of civility in society, this is becoming more mainstream. And I think that that's what's bringing this to the fore in many respects.
Yeah, when we're seeing it above highways, there was some hate speech. I don't believe it was targeted at Jews today, but above, I think it was 270 even today, right? When it's becoming more mainstream and becoming just like part of different news outlets, that makes me really nervous as well. Yeah, Judy, I realized I sort of threw that out about what's happening in Montgomery County today. She asked about, can I talk more about what happened at the council today? So Montgomery County Council wanted to adopt a resolution for a definition of anti-Semitism to be used as an educational tool throughout Montgomery County. Wonderful, right? They're going to use the IHRA definition, which is the Holocaust Association. I don't know the exact name. I'm forgetting the exact name of the association who created this working definition. And originally, I will be honest, the definition was problematic because it sort of equated anti-Semitism with any criticism towards Israel. And that was problematic for a lot of different people. So when they first put this out in the summer, a lot of Jews wrote back saying, please don't do this. We don't love this definition. And so they reworked it. They reworked it and said, actually, if it is against Israel in a way that says that Jews don't have a right to have a Jewish state, then yeah, it's anti-Semitic. But criticizing the government and policy of Israel, that's fair game. That's free speech. And so I believe that they did their due diligence in changing the language of this definition. And so we were there to show our support for the council members who voted unanimously to adopt this resolution with this definition. But there were a number of other Jews there and people of other ethnicities and other religions who still believed that the definition was not okay. And so,
can you say more about, so I'm not clear what the definition they're trying to prefer. What is it? How are they defining it?
So I would say, yes. So Rabbi Shankman just put it in the chat.
Oh, okay.
And thanks, Rabbi Shankman. And to be honest, Judy, it's confusing. And it was confusing there to know exactly what, like, I get that they were against the definition, but I was unsure what they wanted to have there differently, to be honest. So it's a really good question and I wish I could answer it. So listen, I don't want to give Kanye West any more of a platform than he already has. He has a very large platform. And as I said before, people are taking him seriously. And so I think we need to take him seriously. And there are certain anti-Semitic using that is calling to people who who do this all the time and who are getting energized by the fact that a celebrity is doing it. And so we are going to look at his original tweet, or latest tweet, I guess, and dissect it for anti-Semitic tropes as a way to start honing our tools to not just say, oh, that thing that someone said, it's making me feel a little icky, but I'm sure it's an anti-Semitic, so I can move on. Or that thing that they said is definitely anti-Semitic because I don't like it. No. There's a real study here, and there's real tropes that we can look for and say, actually, that thing that you just said is buying into a lot of miseducation about Jews as unbelievably powerful or taking over the world. And like, here's where that's coming from. Like, do you know about the protocols of the elders of Zion, right? And things like that, so that we have a few tools to do this. You'll see that the stuff that I'm bringing to you tonight is not in like the rabbi's secret lair for like information. It's all out there in the public, right? So I'm using websites like adl.org that has a full content on different tropes and where they come from. I highly recommend you look at it. I'll give you the source later, as well as Southern Poverty Law Center too. And so intentionally, I'm not going to like extreme primary sources. we do go to the New Testament at some point, so that you know where to look when you feel like someone has said something or done something or you've read something that feels a little off to you. So that's where we're going to go. I am using PowerPoint. I hate PowerPoint because I can't see your faces. So know that I would hope this to be a conversation, and just sort of like yell out or raise your hand so that, and I'll try to be scrolling through as I'm on PowerPoint here. All right, just give me 1 second. What we talk about when we talk about anti-Semitism, that's the theme, right? Is that we can't just labeling something anti-Semitic. People unfortunately sort of recoil at that and say like, oh, you're being sensitive, or it's not okay. No, there's actually ways that we can see what anti-Semitism is. Like, what are we talking about when we say anti-Semitism? What tropes are there? What things are these people saying that they're perpetuating? So this is the original tweet that Kanye sent out about a month ago. Do I have someone who could read this for us? It's like, even the grammar is all messed up, but would someone be willing to read for us?
Sure.
Stephen, go for it.
I am?
Yes, Stephen.
I'm a bit sleepy tonight, but when I wake up, I'm going to DEFCON 3 on Jewish people. The funny thing is, I actually can't be anti-Semitic because Black people are actually Jew also. You guys have toyed with me and tried to blackball anyone who ever opposes your agenda.
Thank you. So I bring this tonight, again, not to elevate his platform, but so that we can dissect it. So let's dissect it. We can read this and my stomach hurts and I hate it and I want to put it away. We can't put it away. So we're going to dive into it. What are elements of this? Let's break it down. What are elements that are offensive to us? Choose some words that are offensive to us here.
I can't even speak the English language. I hate to sometimes, don't mean to laugh, but the guy can't even write. And then we're all working on his language. It just makes me cringe.
Isn't it amazing? I know. For those of you who study with me all the time, like we study some pretty great writers, and here we are dissecting this. But no, not one of them, for sure. So one thing that's offensive to us is his grammar. Agreed. Other aspects that are offensive.
The fact that he has over 30 million followers and that he's going DEFCON 3 on the Jewish people.
Okay, so he has over it's over 10 million followers, I believe, and it's DEFCON 3. So first of all, he said it wrong. It should be DEFCON, right? It's like a military tactic of, I know very little about this, but the term is DEFCON, not DEFCON. I'm sure there are people on the call who are part of the military who would understand that more. So that's the first part that's offensive, right? Is that it's violence. He's perpetuating, he's calling for violence against the Jewish people, which again, we can just say, well, yeah, that's what you do when you're hating someone. Actually not. It's a particular trope towards Judaism that we're going to look at, that often it becomes violent much quicker towards Jews than other people. And that's a little bit because of the history that we have. Not that we've done, but the history around anti-Semitism that seems to allow for people to be violent towards us. other aspects of this that feel offensive, other parts that we want to pull out that feel like they might have tropes to them.
The funny thing is I actually can't be anti-Semitic.
Great,
because
okay.
Black people are actually Jews also.
Great, Faith, thank you. So we're going to look at that too, right? This idea that there's a true Jew out there that is perpetuated by the radical Hebrew Israelite community. We're going to look at that and why that is. And what is he even talking about, right? That Black people are actually Jew also. I don't believe he's talking about Jews of color here, who we are really proud to have in our communities. He's talking about a different type of community. Not to mention how hurtful this can be to our Jews of color community, who might unfortunately be incorrectly identified as part of this group.
Also people who are Black, and you know, it's offensive to his own ethnic group, you know, because there are many Black people who are not Jewish but respect Judaism. We've been working closely together. That was one of the things that we were working on last year and the year before and the year before.
Absolutely, absolutely, yes. He's not, while this is mainly targeting Jews, he's not indiscriminate, without a doubt, without a doubt. Other words that we're going to pick up on that feel like we should pick up on if we're dissecting this text.
Toyed with me.
Great, toyed with me, right? This idea that Jews are people who toy or trick or are disloyal. Perfect. Last one, there's one more that I want us to get to.
Blackball anyone who opposes you.
Okay, blackball anyone who ever opposes you. And you stopped right at the last word, agenda, which comes up in like every single anti-Semitic comment ever, right? This word agenda, that should like pick up our ears should perk up every time we hear it. And we're going to look at why does it matter when people say the Jewish agenda, or something along those lines, or our agenda. All right, any other comments just on his tweet before we dive into this a bit?
I wanted to say something.
Yeah.
This includes, I guess, all of the main components: stereotyping, prejudice, hate, and violence.
Yeah, he hit them all. He wasn't indiscriminate there either, right? That anyone who is against hate in any form should look at this and be extremely concerned and be really concerned. And honestly, I think the grammar throws us. I think the grammar throws us for, oh, he's crazy. He's clearly, it's like, you know, a late night rant. And I don't think we should be thrown, which is why we're spending this much time on it.
I think the all caps of the Jewish people also lets him, like, he's saying, like, make no mistake of what I'm saying.
Yeah, he's pretty proud of his words here, right? And he hasn't, to be clear, he has not backed down, right? Adidas dropped him, Gap dropped him, Balenciaga dropped him, and he hasn't backed down. So he's been clear about how he feels. So we're going to dive into this and where these ideas come from. Okay. You can see how good I am at PowerPoint, that I just made these little boxes around the sections that we're going to look into. But the first thing we talked about, right, was this idea of DEFCON 3. We believe he meant DEFCON 3, or he meant to really escalate it to death. And this idea that violence is allowed somehow towards Jews, that violence is allowed somehow towards Jews. So remember, I said that I was going to bring a lot of secondary sources, mainly from this Anti-Semitism Uncovered from ADL.org, mainly to show you that you too can Google ADL.org and get on there and see this Anti-Semitism Uncovered and these tropes. But do I have someone to tell us a little bit about blood libel and how this might be connected to violence towards Jews? Can someone read this section for us? Judy Oppenheimer, you're at the top of my screen. Can you read?
The origins of the blood libel, also known as the ritual murder charge, date back to the Middle Ages. The first accusation against Jews for allegedly killing Christian children emerged in 12th century England following the death of a boy named William in Norwich. Years later, a monk, Thomas of Monmouth, blamed local Jews for the boy's murder, accusing them of killing William in a perverse reenactment of Jesus' crucifixion. The accusation then transformed into blood libel in the 13th century on the continent, when a blood motif was added. Now Jews were accused of killing Christian children to obtain their blood.
Oh my God.
Yikes.
Okay, so what, yeah, Steven, you have your hand up?
No, I was thinking this is a famous trope in Christianity. Actually, I believe it's Catholicism, having to do with the using of Jewish blood to make matzah, which is where this comes from. So it's Passover becomes tied to this very clearly as well.
Thank you. And why would, I was about to say that too, so thank you so much, right? That actually the like next sentence about this is that Jews would use the rumor, right? This horrible rumor is that Jews would use this blood in their matzah. Why Passover? Why is that significant? Like why would everyone say that this happens at Passover for matzah? Yeah, Richard Newman.
Well, that's the killing of the first.
Oh, sorry, Richard Newman, go for it.
Sorry.
Oh, we can't hear you, unfortunately.
Last Supper.
Yes, the Last Supper, right? That, and we're going to look at some New Testament material in a second, but that the Last Supper was a Passover Seder. Passover and Easter, we know from our calendar, are always linked.
Right.
And therefore there's this connection towards groups who think about it this way, that our Passover holiday is a violent holiday, right? Because it is so close to Jesus's crucifixion. How would this, yeah, Judy?
Wouldn't it also have to do with killing of the firstborn and spilling of the blood of those firstborn boys?
Great. I mean, not great, you know what I mean? But but yes, right? That not only do we have that as part of the Pesach Seder, right? That God killed the firstborn boy, and that seemed to be a good thing for Jews, right? I think that's a problematic aspect of our Seder that any of us should sort of question at our Seder and think about when is violence okay and when is violence not okay. But they're not looking at it through nuance. They're just seeing, look, they kill firstborns over there, so why not over here? And so it seems to make logical sense that this would continue, right? That we would continue this. Why then would this idea of blood libel? Sorry, the other thing I was going to say was that also that Judaism has a long history with blood, with both the sanctity of blood, right? That it's very holy. Looking at our ritual sacrifices at the temple, that blood is seen as both very holy and very scary and very dirty. And so there's already feelings around blood in Jews that probably were sort of in the milieu at the time, that like Jews have this weird thing with blood. Think about like kashrut, right? And that you have to drain the blood from the animal. So imagine these people who don't know Jews, but sort of see them draining animals of all their blood. Maybe they even know about some of our menstruation and nidar rituals in which we like are very scared of blood. And now suddenly they're thinking about crucifixion and the death of the firstborn, blood to matzah. Why would this why do I bring this up with his DEFCON 3 comment? And the idea that violence and intense violence is often associated with anti-Semitism and hate towards Jews. I haven't heard from yet. Yeah, Stephen, I saw your hand.
Well, I was thinking that I'm trying to think of whether or not there were pogroms around Easter. I'm not sure I'm answering your question correctly. I think it was 1465, 1500 was the St. Simon of Trent blood libel. And the question is whether or not, because the holidays came together, the violence would occur after the Passover, after Easter Sunday. They would rush out and as I remember my grandfather telling me stories of Eastern Europe of anti-Semitism active around Easter.
Yeah, so yes, it's true, and also that when this rumor first happened, right, when this boy William, he really did die, right? He did die, that there was a huge pogrom right afterwards towards Jews, right? So the idea here being that if Jews can be so violent towards Jesus, so violent towards young boys, then isn't society doing their part by being violent towards Jews, right? Doesn't this just seem like an equal, violence for violence sake, an eye for an eye, if you will? Of course, just to be clear, that's not what I believe, but that's often where a lot of the violence towards Jews is coming from. It's coming from this trope about blood libel, that there's something grotesque about us, that we enjoy this type of death, we enjoy this type of violence, we enjoy this type of blood, and therefore, of course, violence can be put on us. Right. Any questions about the violence motif here? And I realize this is a little, hefty for a Tuesday night, but I guess you knew what you were getting into if you were going to sign up for an anti-Semitism course. So, okay, the next trope that we have is this idea he can't possibly be anti-Semitic because he's a true Jew, which is a Black Jew, although that has shifted. So it used to be this group of people who we're about to hear about, the Southern Poverty Law Center, used to be known as the Black Israelite community or the Black Hebrew Israelite community. The Southern Poverty Law Center has since taken out Black from their name, mainly because they are now a racially diverse community. They're no longer just Black, and also because Southern Poverty Law Center rightfully knows that Black people are also hated in our country and doesn't want to add anything to that. And so they're using the term radical Hebrew Israelites, which I agree with using that term. So do I have someone who would read this section about who they are in case we don't know who they are? Radical Hebrew Israelites, would someone read this for me?
Where are you looking? Which part?
Oh, right here, Radical Hebrew Israelites.
Oh,
yeah, Judy, you can keep being a reader. Go for it.
Radical Hebrew Israelites appropriate biblical Jewish heritage to claim an exclusive identity as the true chosen people of God and decry Jews as the impostors and thieves. These groups seek a divine form of dominance rather than equity by declaring superiority over all other nations, biblical term for other races and ethnicity, and strict adherence to biblical literalism to legitimize their ideology. They spread their beliefs through street preaching, often verbally harassing, provoking, and shaming any non-Israelite and those of their own community who don't follow their beliefs.
Thank you. Okay, so listen, multiple people read and claim the Torah, right? Christians read and claim the Torah. They call it the Old Testament, right? Islam reads and claims the Torah. Why are the radical Hebrew Israelites problematic in the way that they're doing this?
Their fundamentalism.
They're fundamentalists.
Their exclusiveness.
Right, that it's only them.
And that there's only them, and there's nobody else is any good. And if you don't follow them, you're wrong.
Okay, so that there's only one way in their understanding. There's only one way to be Jewish, and also that it seems. I mean, I think it's really interesting that now this group is racially diverse, because when I first heard about them a few years ago, it seemed to me like they were actually really into some like bloodline type stuff about like tracking Israelites from Palestine to Africa to America. And they were really concerned about a bloodline tracking and making sure that basically that it is Black people who are sort of the original Israelites. That seems to have changed, as now there's multiple other diversities in there. Yeah, Richard.
Yeah, I don't think this quote does them the correct justice. If you read their materials, and I've read a lot of it, I picked them up on street corners, there's a lot of anger, back to the prior slide, there's a lot of anger, there's a lot of nascent violence in their antagonism towards those people, us, who think we're Jewish, aren't part of their cult.
Yeah. Absolutely, thank you. And yeah, it's really scary. It's really scary to like walk through New York City and to like pick up a pamphlet that has it and think that you're picking up something else, and suddenly there's a ton of violence towards us. How is this problematic? We said it a little bit earlier, but it's not just problematic to Jews. How is this also problematic to Blacks, Jews, and Jews of color? Either what Kanye said or this group.
They're the enemy, or even more than the enemy, that they're, they need to be killed because they are trying to destroy what is important and what they believe in.
Okay, so they are telling that other people need to be killed and destroyed. And it's not just right. We are feeling it intensely from them as Jews, but also that that part of this is also that Black people who are not being part of this are possibly going to be mislabeled as even more violent than society already says they are, which is problematic, right? So it's not, if they're not helping anyone, they're not helping anyone. Other comments or questions about the radical Hebrew Israelite?
But I also think that for Kanye, I actually can't be anti-Semitic. I mean, you know,
yeah,
because Black people are actually Jews also. I mean, I think it's a calculated response. I think all of this was very calculated by him. I mean, I do think he's crazy, but he's not that crazy. I mean, I think that there's true mental illness there. But that is maybe an explanation, but not an excuse. This doesn't excuse his behavior, and certainly doesn't. Something is happening here, which I think is a real response to what is happening in the wider society. There's this normalization of anti-Semitism, and he's picking up on those, as the kids would say, those vibes. Yeah. That it's okay to say these things in public forums in a way that doesn't allow really for discussion around what he's saying. He's making a pronouncement. I'm not anti-Semitic because I'm Black and other Black people are Jews also. He has no idea what he's talking about. Yeah. He doesn't understand. I mean, I think he does understand what plays, and that's the scary part. He is really responding to what plays these days.
Yeah.
And that to me is the scariest part of this, which is, you know, you can go on Twitter, you Kanye West with all these millions of followers can go on Twitter and say these things, and there will be not that much, you know, maybe you'll lose some money, but, you know, other than that, I mean, you know,
yeah,
there's not too much blowback on this.
Yeah. And also what is kind of wild about that statement, which you picked up on, is that he's saying, right, he's kind of saying words don't matter, right? That it doesn't matter what I say because I am Black and therefore Jewish, and therefore my words don't matter. Whereas like, he makes a living based off of words and music, and not to mention his words are being blasted everywhere now. And of course, in terms of our faith, words matter intensely, right? The world was created by words. We are a big people of words. This should hurt us in many ways. Anyone who's saying, "Oh, words don't matter," we should be extremely questioning of them. Thank you, Linda. Thank you, Judy. You had your hand up.
I did. I was thinking, I'm in 12 Jewish questions, and our first class was on why we're called the people of the book, which goes to what you're just saying.
Exactly.
Words. But I just think underlying all this is a commercial trope, because while he had not yet been thrown out of was it Adidas was the last
Adidas. Mm-hmm.
A lot of the companies that have now, you know, had disentangled themselves from him are Levi Strauss, and I forget, you know, and all these are owned by Jewish people, or they're big commercial enterprises. And I'm wondering if part of this, as he was starting to lose his advertisers, as he was offending people right and left, this was another way to, because when he says anyone who opposes your agenda, you Jewish people who own all the companies of the world, you own, you're taking, so, right? That's that other trope about.
Yeah, and we're gonna get there. Absolutely, it could be. So let's. I want to keep going because I definitely want to. It's you know, I want to make sure that the plan is to end at 9, and I want to be very respectful of people's time. So the radical Hebrew Israelites, right, that this is a clear shout out to them, saying like, you know, you're doing right, your cause is right, and therefore he is right, and he is unable to be anti-Semitic because he's Jewish. Now we get to some fun New Testament stuff, which, you know, I'm not an expert in case you didn't know. Definitely, I feel I'm an expert in Torah, but anything new is not for me. I like my Testament 3,000 years old. But here is a little bit of where the idea of trope of this disloyalty comes from. I mean, Judy, you want to just keep on reading? You're going strong.
Sure, yeah. Now the festival of unleavened bread, called the Passover, was approaching, and the chief priests and the teachers of the law were looking for some way to get rid of Jesus, for they were afraid of the people. Then Satan entered Judas, called Iscariot, one of the 12. And Judas went to the chief priests and the officers of the temple guard and discussed with them how he might betray Jesus. They were delighted and agreed to give him money. He consented and watched for an opportunity to hand Jesus over to them when no crowd was present.
Okay, so what's going on here?
Was this the Last Supper? Is that they're talking about?
It's
right?
around, it's like the same time. It's not actually everyone sitting down to eat at the Last Supper, but what's going on here?
Well, they were looking for someone to help get rid of Jesus because he was having too much sway over the people.
Okay, who's they?
The Romans, among others, right? The Romans?
So usually it's the Romans. Here they're saying it's the chief priests and the teachers, which if you were to put that into Hebrew, right? Teachers, the word for teacher is Rav, meaning rabbis, right? So it's the rabbis and the chief priests, the people who are doing sacrifices at the time, right? So this is where we get the idea that the Jews killed Jesus, right? Which is possible, right? That in some, while that the New Testament is contradictory, just like the Old Testament is contradictory sometimes, right? And that in some narratives of the crucifixion, the Romans are the ones who kill Jesus, and then in other narratives, it's the priests and the rabbis, which is because Jesus was scary to them, and in that time, that's what happened, right? The example I gave today I did this for congressional staffers today as well, is like, yeah, sometimes that happens, and that our holy texts have problematic stuff in them, right? So we have this whole Passover Seder where we talk about how the Egyptians are horrible and they enslaved us forever. Let me tell you that one of Eric's best friend's wives is Egyptian, and we invited her to Seder not thinking about this, and she sat there being like, should I leave? Like, this is horrible. Like, am I like, do you all think this about me and about Egypt? Of course not. Of course we don't. It's just part of our story. So for some Christians, for some Catholics, this is just part of the story and doesn't turn into hate and disloyalty forever. For others, it does, right? And for others, this disloyalty stays of priests and teachers, or priests and rabbis plotting to take down Jesus, and stays as this idea of that Jews are disloyal, you can't trust them. And that's codified or made even stronger by Judas. So what does Judas do? Or what happens to Judas?
What happens to him later, you mean, after they kill Jesus?
No, like just to summarize this.
He betrays Jesus.
Okay, he betrays Jesus. Also, it's not even that he does it, right? Satan entered Judas, that there's something devilish about Judas. And then he betrays him. That's often what gets said, but actually what happens here is he tells these officers, and the temple guard gives Judas money, right? There's also a play of words here, Judas and Judah and Judeans and Jews, right? That also plays into another trope of we'll do anything for money, right? That we're greedy, and that tends to coincide with this disloyalty, right? That Jews will give you up for a little bit of money. And this trope gets passed down again and again and again until we see it on Twitter from Kanye West, who uses words like toyed with me and blackballed, which we might not see as disloyalty that's stemmed in Judas's actions, but actually is a 3,000-year trope of anti-Semitism. Yeah, Stephen.
This is a remarkably disturbing quote from Luke. I don't know the exact translation of which particular version of the Bible, as the Christians see it, this is from, but this has all you need to be able to be chased home from the bus stop in the 1950s by kids from the Catholic school calling you Christ killer. And up until very recently, I think it was John Paul II, I think they changed some of this so that it became a little bit less odious. But nevertheless, this is built in. And the question really that this raises to my mind is, how do you get past anti-Semitism when this is a rock hard piece of the liturgy in Christendom? I don't think that because it was then, it must be now, but it is certainly part of the thing back in the day.
It is, and I think that we have to remember, I think the only way to understand it because listen, there are wonderful people in the world who use this text to do really great work, right? To do really great good in the world.
Yes, yes.
And I think the way that we can understand it is what we do with our problematic texts, right? Is that we shift them and we try not to sweep them under the rug, but we interpret them, right? That we have a law that says that if there is if you have a wayward son, that you should stone him to death. That's horrible. If you read that and you're not a Jew, you're going to say these Jewish people are horrible, right? They stone their children to death. And of course we don't, that gets interpreted right away in a different light, but that could be true for lots of different texts. And so I don't want us to sort of, yes, this is problematic, this is scary, and it's definitely been used for harm and to hurt others and to hurt us, absolutely, but not always. Did that answer a question a little bit?
Mhm.
Okay.
Rabbi,
Yeah, Faith.
question. I know how we reinterpret, but I also know that there are all these, groups where we bring all of the clergy from all of the different religions together. How much of some of this is being discussed in terms of what impact it is having, and how can they all work together to also have the teachings do the same thing? Because I think that that's one of the things, in my estimation, that is important as we move forward.
Yeah, I agree.
So some of this.
So Faith, I think that's a really interesting point. And I will share honestly with you that I'm at my 5th year at Washington Hebrew. Most of that, and the majority of my rabbinate, has been in a pandemic, which has meant that things that are in person are sort of things of necessity. And we haven't, or I haven't been meeting with my clergy across religions in the same way that I think was happening beforehand before this happened, right? That sort of has been lost. And at the same time, right, I just heard today that in Montgomery County, anti-Semitic attacks or anti-Semitic events have increased 17% since 2020, right? Since this time that we've been in pandemic. And so I think your question brings up a really great point for me, that perhaps it's time I start. And we've been doing other types of outreach, right? We've been doing a lot of stuff for social justice work with other Black churches in the area, and things like that. But we don't often study texts together, and I think that's a really good point. So thank you. Okay, our last trope, and then we'll close out with all of you a little bit. Which is this word agenda, which comes up again and again and again when we see anti-Semitic stuff, right? So again, I'm using that adl.org, which you all have access to. You can see it too, where this idea of agenda comes from. So I'll read this one. And the idea of agenda, meaning the trope here, is power, right? That Jews have this overreaching power among all different things, and that we have some agenda to like take over the world or what. And here's where it comes from. Ideas and fears about Jewish power were codified in the early 20th century with the publication of the Protocols of the Elders of Zion, an elaborate forgery reporting a supposed meeting that never occurred. Tsarist secret police in Russia first circulated portions of the protocols purported to be leaked minutes from secret meetings of Jewish leaders who were conspiring to take over the world. I see some of us nodding, right? This might be a document that we know of and we've seen, right? You can see it online. Why would the Tsarist secret police create this or perpetuate it? Like, or why would any government create it or perpetuate it? We can go back and think about what's happening in Russia in the early 20th century.
They were trying to get rid of the Jews, weren't they?
It was scapegoating.
Yeah,
Scapegoating.
They were scapegoating, right?
Yeah.
Richard, can you speak more about that?
Yeah, it was a distraction. I mean, it's a little tougher when you get to Ford, who reproduces it. But
Yes.
in the Tsarist period, it was a distraction. It's let's have a common enemy. You guys can stop being angry at the Tsar. Here's somebody else to be angry at.
Yeah. So there was just the revolution right beforehand, right? And so things are feeling shaky. Things are not feeling okay in society. People are feeling powerless. And so what do you do when you're feeling powerless? Say, look at those people who have the power. They are the reason you're feeling powerless. Everybody hate on them, right? So if the Tsars wanted to just imprison Jews, that's one thing. They didn't. They wanted to change society to think about, look, the power issue is over there. It's not here. think about the past 3 years we've had. We are all feeling powerless, right? We are powerless against our government in some ways. We're powerless, and the government that we want, depending on which side of the spectrum you're on. We're certainly powerless, it seems, for our health, that we seem to not be able to control what happens to our bodies. And well, I guess that's a choice comment as well, but also about the pandemic, that it seems like we're unsure when mortality is sort of going to take us and feel stronger. And so it seems like, of course, at this moment, people are going to flip a switch and say, okay, so who does seem to have power? Because I don't have it. So a group must have power. Okay, and here is the Jewish agenda that's so easy to come to when we feel like we're unable to have, when other people feel like they're unable to have power. Rachel, Karen, hi.
It also enables people to feel like they're victims. And once you're a victim, then it's legitimate to push back against others. It's something that's happening in our broader culture now, very much so, especially with the Christian right. They feel that they are victims of being canceled. And so victimhood gives people the entitlement to do all kinds of things that they might not do if they were in a position of greater strength, or if they felt that they were in a position of greater strength.
Yeah, there's been this term that's been coming up a lot called punching up, right? That these people who are, or Kanye or other people who are saying these statements, that it seems like they are punching up because Jews have all this power. So as a victim, why can't I say that you're horrible because you are above me and therefore you're bad, right? So yeah, victimhood plays a huge role in this. Stephen, yes.
It may be also part of the broader conversation about creating the other. And this, when Ford was doing the Protocols of the Elders of Zion in Detroit, it was a height of anti-immigration in the early 20th century. And this was part of sort of the eugenics movement, and people came in flavors and so forth. So that this was part of the, how do you construct the other? You could slice and dice, and so the Jews would be one of those categories that you could disallow in this case. Absolutely.
Social identity theory comes in huge here, right? If you are part of a group and you want to solidify that group, find somebody to hate, right? That's research has proven that it does work well. It's just gross. And so if you want to create a national identity, find another group to hate that doesn't fit with your national identity. And unfortunately, we've seen this happen again and again to us and to others as well. So what do we, sorry, Stephen, yeah. Was that
so the Christian nationalists that are, if they're rising in the United States today, if they're Christian nationalists, and what we just shared, who would the enemy be? It wouldn't be the Muslims necessarily, but it could be.
Yeah, I think it could be, you could have multiple, right? I don't think that and anyone who is different from you at all, right? And strays from your group and your group identity. So what do we do, right? So while we have been dissecting Kanye West's tweet for now 45 minutes, 55 minutes, this session was actually not about Kanye West, right? It's about showing you how you can dissect an anti-Semitic comment or an anti-Semitic act, how you could do this yourself, right? I sort of helped us through it together today, but there's ways that you can do this on your own. So here are some of the things. Also, someone said overwhelmed, that you're feeling really overwhelmed. There is so much to read and to engage with right now that I wanted to be able to give you a few things that I've really loved engaging with to sort of limit what you're looking at. So first is that and I can send this out to everyone who has registered. The first is that website about Anti-Semitism Uncovered that literally will give you these, there's like 8 different tropes on there, and we'll show you where they come from and how it can manifest today. So again, right, if you're seeing this somewhere, if someone's saying something to you, look at that website and say, like, let me just check it and see if anything comes up, if anything gets triggered here. One of the best things that I've seen written recently is actually by MRC Entertainment, which is the production company that was going to produce a documentary on Kanye West. It was done, finished, ready to go, and they pulled it. And they wrote, it says the company is owned by a Jew, a Christian, and a Muslim. And they wrote the most beautiful statement against Kanye West, and a beautiful statement about anti-Semitism, how it plays into Zionism or anti-Zionism in a way that people, I've sort of shown it to lots of different people, that people all over the spectrum, the political spectrum about Israel are like, yes, that is it. That is the issue. And so definitely read that. And then finally, there's this article by Dana Bash, who's a big CNN reporter who created the Anti-Semitism docuseries that CNN did this year. But she wrote this very personal article in conjunction with the docuseries about her 10-year-old son who asked her for a Jewish star necklace for Hanukkah, and she waved it off. She waved it off, she says, because like he's 10 years old, what does he really mean? But actually probably because she wasn't sure she wanted him to be wearing that at school. And he told her off, basically. He said when he didn't get the Jewish star during Hanukkah, like, I really wanted it because that's what shows my identity. Right, that people at school wear crosses all the time, and it's so cool because they know that everyone knows that they're Christian. I want to wear my Jewish star because I want everyone to know who I am and I'm a Jew. Now, which leads me to like my last point, which is this is an AJC hashtag, an AJC thing, that now is the time, right? I understand that people don't feel safe and that we fear for our grandchildren and our children, and perhaps even for us. And I want you to feel safe. I don't want you to do anything that makes you feel unsafe. And if there was ever a time to wear the Jewish star necklace, if there was ever a time to go to services, if there was ever a time to be really adamant that your social justice is based in how you were raised as a Jew and based in your Jewish values, now is the time to like yell it from the rooftops. It has been proven time and time again that the number one thing that Jews can do to combat anti-Semitism is to be proudly Jewish. Mainly because the people that you work with, the people that you engage with every day, the people at the grocery store don't know they're engaging with a Jew. And if they never meet a Jew, they're going to continue to hate this other. But when people realize that the person that they love and trust and know is Jewish, then suddenly they have a face for it. And it really is the thing that is going to combat anti-Semitism, right? This is, we can put out as many definitions as we want, as many, we can have as many trips and convenings together as we want. The only thing that is going to combat anti-Semitism is for people who feel this in their blood to know a Jew. That's it. And they're not going to do that unless we make it very clear that we are Jewish. So this was actually my Yom Kippur High Holiday sermon for 2239. Before any of this sort of, well, not before, right? It was still going on, but before Kanye did any of this, or it was right then, I think. And this is my personal Rosh Hashanah goal, or 5783 goal, is to be, and I'm a rabbi, right? The fact that I have to say this to myself is wild, but is to be Jewish and proud, and to be really clear about who I am, because I really do think that makes a difference in the world. And so if I can give anybody some strength to do that as well, I hope to. It's 8:59, so I am going to end with a little bit of a teaching and a prayer, and then I'm happy to stay on if anyone has any questions and if anyone has any questions. So this week, our Torah portion is Lech Lecha. It's when God tells Abraham to get up from his home and go to a place that you do not know, right? And Abraham does it. Abraham leaves with his wife, Sarah. And that's kind of it. That's all they have. Just Abraham and Sarah going to a land that God will show them. And I often think about how amazing it is that, Abraham Avinu, our father, the father of our people, that one of his defining features is that he's brave, is bravery, is that he sees, he gets asked to do something and he says yes. Right, and doesn't, and probably I imagine he was scared and had fear in the same ways that we have fear and are nervous and are unsure about the future. And yet Abraham puts one foot in front of the other in order to make a better world, in order to have descendants, in order to make this great nation. And so my prayer for all of us is that we harness a little bit of Abraham's bravery in the next few days, the next few weeks, in the next few years, as we said, this isn't going anywhere, right? But that we harness a little bit of this bravery to say that we are here and that we are proud, that we are proud descendants of Abraham, and are gonna make that descendancy proud, and be clear about who we are. Thank you all so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
I hope this was helpful, and I am happy to stay on if anyone has any questions.